Hey everybody, welcome back to Freedom Malts. If you're new here, I'm Germ, and I was called out. Randall over at the Whiskey Shaman podcast called me out to come up with 7 of the most interesting whiskeys in my cabinet. So here we are. If you haven't tuned into the Whiskey Shaman podcast yet, you need to go do that. Just wait till the end of this video to do so. So the whiskeys in this list, it's a Scotch, a rye, a bourbon, a wheated whiskey or a wheat whiskey, a finished whiskey, a single malt or ASM, and a limited or unicorn bottle. So before we get into this list, I'm going to call out 3 others to do the same thing. I'm calling on Dylan over at US Smallcraft. I'm calling on John over at Co-op Whiskey. And calling on Doug over at Single Malt Frontier. Let's see what you got, guys. All right, so first up, Scotch. I am picking this bottle, and it is the Compass Box Orchard House. Nothing super interesting about this whiskey other than the fact that this is the bottle that I recommend to new drinkers who want to try Scotch, new to Scotch already drinkers, and people who tell me, I don't like Scotch, I don't like that smoky flavor. This thing is the most gentle, fruit-forward, delicious whiskey that I think I have, and it makes everybody enjoy it. Everybody enjoys this whiskey who tries it. I haven't met a person that doesn't thoroughly enjoy this whiskey. $40 to $50, this thing is an absolute stunner, and pretty much it's a must-have. Next up, rye whiskey. And I'm sure this comes as a big surprise, but I'm going with a store pick of Driftless Glen rye. The store that picks it is not as important. However, this particular one is one of the best I've ever had. These store picks are starting to come in at 7+ years. They're really achieving some awesome characteristics. They are wonderfully rye spicy. Leathers, tobaccos, like a burnt wood smokiness. It's creamy and luscious texture. They're just absolutely fantastic. If you can find a store pick of the rye, definitely grab it. If you can't find a store pick of the rye and you can find the standard shelf version of their single barrel rye, don't pass on that. That's absolutely fantastic. Okay, next up on the list, we got bourbon. And I am picking Dettling Bourbon for this one. Couple reasons I'm selecting this one. Now this one is, in particular, is a single cask version. But Dettling Bourbon in general is going to fit the bill on almost all of this. A couple of the reasons I picked this. One, it's outrageously good. Outrageously good. And 2, I mean, it's a 6-grain bourbon mash bill containing oats. There's not a lot of people out there doing that, and that ramps up that interesting factor quite a bit. This particular one has notes of like plum, Asian duck sauce, dark red wine, burnt sugars, coffee, chocolate. I mean, it's all over the map in those dark, unctuous flavors, and it's absolutely fantastic. They're a little place coming out of Alabama. If you can find one of these, absolutely do not hesitate on this. Great, great bourbon. Okay, next up, wheat whiskey or wheated whiskey. I'm going with the Journeyman Corsets, Whips, and Whiskey. Interesting name already, right? But this thing has everything that you would expect out of a barrel-aged whiskey, right? The vanillas, the toffee caramel, the brown sugar. It has all of that. On top of that, though, it's like a wonderfully toasted piece of bread with honey spread on it. There is some taffy sweetness, a little artificial banana coming across the palate, and it's a fun experience. It's an interesting, unique name for a whiskey that gives you an interesting, unique experience, and it definitely is a must try. Coming out of southern Michigan, these guys are starting to make some waves. So if you can locate one, absolutely give it a shot. All right, next up, finished whiskey. I struggled with this one a bit because there is a lot of really interesting finished whiskeys out there. This one in particular gave me what I think and can remember is one of the most unique experiences I've had. This is the Breuckelen 77 single malt finished in a rum cask. This thing has notes of waxy cardboard, fresh twigs and branches, loads of brown sugar, vanilla, fresh cinnamon. But the finish on this one is the wild ride. It's like all of those flavors on a rotating wheel, and they just hit your palate sequentially on the finish that lasts for what seems like forever. Breuckelen, coming out of Brooklyn, New York. They are an awesome smaller distillery that is putting out some amazing whiskey. Absolutely, if you can get a hold of any of this stuff, whether it be their single malt, their bourbon, their rye, whatever, do so. It's top-notch stuff. They are doing a great job, and they should definitely be on your radar. All right, next up, single malt or American single malt. Now, this one was the hardest one for me. I've had so many interesting single malts and American single malts throughout my journey, and it was really hard to narrow it down to just one. But this particular one, I'm picking it because of some really cool, unique processes that it does and very interesting things that happen in the manufacturing of this whiskey. I am selecting Brother Justus. This is their cold peated American single malt. That's right. I said cold peated single malt. Truth be told, I don't know how they achieved that. I really don't. I'm hoping to find out soon, but we'll see where that goes. This thing has given me really classic single malt notes with the addition of like some almond nougat. It's earthy, herbaceous, and has a touch of wet cardboard at the tail end of it. And I just find that really fun in a whiskey. Coming out of the Twin Cities in Minnesota, absolutely really recommend trying to find one of these guys and giving this a shot. This was a really fun and interesting whiskey to get into. All right, so for the last one here, limited or unicorn. I'm definitely going with limited. I only really have one unicorn bottle, and if I had it, it wouldn't be a unicorn anymore. But for this one, I'm more so going with a brand versus a specific distillery, but I will give you a specific distillery on it. And if you didn't see this coming, I'm kind of shocked. Lost Lantern. Inherently, it is limited in just how they are. Lots of single cask releases, and they only produce whatever amount of bottles they do out of a single cask, and that's it. So that's the limit, right? They are making some bigger blends that stick around a little bit longer and have a little bit more spreadability, but even still, their bigger blends are a little bit limited as well. As a distillery, Tom's Foolery. These guys are doing things the hard way, which coincidentally is the right way. They are pumping out some fantastic whiskey with some really good age statements on it. The bourbon 2023 was my bourbon of the year and very close to being my whiskey of the year. I'm assuming the Tom's Foolery Rye will be the same for 2024, if not also the whiskey of the year. These things are absolutely fantastic. They are some of the most interesting bourbon and rye whiskeys that I've had. Absolutely, if you can get a hold of a Tom's Foolery, whether it be Lost Lantern or otherwise, do so. They are fantastic. Lost Lantern as a brand, they're impeccable. Nothing that they put out is short of fantastic. Obviously limited, and that's how it is. But that's what this is about. And if you're looking for a interesting limited release, look no further than Lost Lantern. Simply put, it's perfection in a bottle. So that is my list of 7 most interesting whiskeys that I can come up with. If you stuck around this far, I thank you. Thank you for tuning in. I hope that you can find a few of these on this list and find them just as interesting as I did. And until the next time, cheers to this American spirit.